as you're going through a story, there's going to be points where you can't answer a question that day. And sometimes we'll even say in stories, such and such remains unclear. Make a note of that, and the next day, file a records request or call somebody who might know about that. Keep the process of answering those questions going, and that'll lead to some really amazing places sometimes. So.
JW, you want to add to that? Your folks are on deadline all the time.
Yeah, well, and I would parrot what he said. Nobody's going to hire you as an investigative reporter in television. You got to show your boss that you can do it. One way to do it is join IRE so you can get to tip sheets, so you can find information quickly and know where to look. Let's say there is a construction accident downtown. You go to the OSHA website, you look at the history of the company, and you go to the boss 20 minutes later after the accident and said, hey, look what I found. That makes an impression on a boss. And it's not like you don't have to be a genius to find this. So look for things where you can show that you can dig and drive and find the information quickly. And I could go on and on about the many different circumstances that happen in a daily coverage. One of my jobs on our desk is on our newsroom is to make sure our reporters know where to go if there's something going, so we can get that additional element in the story. And if you can do that efficiently, you'll be remembered. The boss will remember. So then when you come to them with this, hey, I got this idea for a project, they're going to listen to you, at least, and give you some credence.
Yeah.
When I worked at Florida Today, we put public records online, particularly things that we knew that would immediately affect the public, like restaurant inspections. So along with the restaurant review, we tagged in their public record of their latest inspection, which gave a whole different view of, what you were eating. So that, even little things like that, that's what happened was the public got more and more like engaged in reading the records and then calling us up and going, what about this? What about that? So it was great.
I believe if you got it, show it to them. Make
Right.
sure
Oh, yeah.
you do get them engaged. And actually, I've gotten stories off of documents that I didn't have the time to look through, and they said, hey, did you see page 14? And I want to go, oh, yeah, I missed that.
Always read footnotes, too.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best stuff is
Oh yeah, almost always.
Yeah.
Yeah, they break from the bureaucracies and
Right.
just actually.
Have it stuck on the back of the
Right.
records.
Yeah.
So a couple things, we're just going to go through a few kind of premises in this. Is keep an open mind and an open eye. When you think about watchdog reporting, think about what's at risk. There are fairness issues out there in the public domain. There's equal access issues, justice, public safety, the public treasury. All of these things are for you to safeguard and look into. Keep an eye on the important players. I think we can all talk a little bit about this. The rich, powerful, the famous, the influential, the politically connected. No matter what beat you cover, whether it's a water board or a sewer board or a state government, there are always players like this who play into things. You cover a city council meeting, for example, and the city council approves a contract to do a whole bunch of infrastructure work in the city. That's maybe the daily story you have to do for the web and whatever else, but you know what? You might want to kind of like take a look at who's behind the contract. Who's the contractor? Who do they know? If they're giving campaign contributions to anybody in your city. A lot of these things are pretty easy to check. Financial disclosure forms. Every public official and high-ranking bureaucrat is required to file those. And they tell you what stocks they own, what property they own, those kinds of things. You never know where you're going to find familial connections or political connections. You guys want to add anything to that?
I'm waiting on the next one.
Okay. Confirm and verify. Challenge the conventional wisdom. Always be suspicious when you hear people repeating the same truth. Ask them about that truth and ask them what would happen if it were not true.
Yeah, and I've noticed something since the age of the internet that's very interesting. The public is more involved in finding out what's going on in the real world. So you get people that are advocates for certain things, and they research like crazy on the internet. I have a lot of advocates bugging me on many different issues. And though they can be a real pain, there's sometimes a grain of truth in what they say, but you really got to check them out and see where they're coming from. For instance, I've got a lady that's advocating certain prohibitions against dentists, somebody advocating against the airspace over Lindbergh, different types of people that have, frankly, an axe to grind. But back in the day, it used to be PR agencies and the government agencies that would hit you up with this, but now you have the public, because of the internet, they're smarter, they do a lot of their own checking, but obviously you check their checking.
The other thing I think Ryan and I can talk about is this next one, get the data. We happen to be a data-driven organization because there is so much data out there now. Everything's kept digitally. You can request a lot more public information in electronic form. Governments just simply keep their information this way. You can bring a huge level of precision to your reporting. Instead of having to say about 50 contracts, you can say 48 contracts in the last 59 days. I mean, you can really be precise, and I think it gives a huge level of credibility. I tell a lot of journalists and my students, if you have one little bit of geekster in you, and you think that you like to fool around with spreadsheets and other kinds of, software, database managers, whatever, there are jobs out there in journalism, like legitimate full-time jobs for people who like to do this, because even traditional media is recognizing the importance of being able to give the public full databases, but also to bring that level of legitimacy to their reporting.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it allows us to do stories we could never have done before. I mean, this has been true for a few decades now, but it's really widely being embraced at this moment. I mean, a year and a half ago, I was working on a story. We received tips that DUI checkpoints in a certain part of Northern California were being used to seize cars, not make DUI arrests. That they're starting at 4 in the afternoon, and there would be literally not a single drunk on the road they would encounter, but they would be seizing 20 cars from illegal immigrants who couldn't get driver's licenses. And so I started checking around, and I started finding, well, it's more than just this one community. It's these 6, well, maybe it's these 15. So I requested the data from actually an interesting place. That part of it was being held by a program at UC Berkeley that administers an intense checkpoint program. That's another thing, is look for alternate sources of data. I mean, different agencies that might touch on your subject that aren't necessarily the main source might be more willing to give information up. But getting off the point, when I got the data from that department showing what was actually happening at these checkpoints, number of cars through, number of DUI arrests, number of impounds, number of every sort of aspect of that could be tracked, it showed that the disparity was in 120 cities in California, and that the statewide average was 6 or 7 cars seized for every 1 DUI arrest at these operations, and that in a lot of communities, the average was 20 to 1. In some communities, it was 60 to 1. And then as we eventually learned from Bell, they were running tow-a-thons, asset forfeiture for revenue generation. So my story ran a little bit before all the Bell discoveries, but Bell actually showed up as one of the extreme cases in there where this had clearly become a money-making operation. And with the data, I was able to calculate an estimated that it was generating an estimated $40 million a year for cities and tow companies just at checkpoints, and that money was pure profit because the state was funding 100% the cost of these operations, the checkpoints themselves. So it was just massive money generators for these agencies. The way they're running the operations has serious constitutional issues that are still being sorted out right now before the Ninth Circuit.
But you can see this example shows that data not only allows you to be really precise in your reporting, but it also directs you to stories. I mean, the data doesn't tell you what the story is, but it tells you that it leads you to a whole bunch of other questions. When you look at that data and you see, hey, they're seizing 6 to 1 or 25 to 1, you think, wow, why? And so then your regular reporting skills come into play, where you start doing interviews and really digging into what the data shows you. Moving along, one thing I'll just say is, I'm sure you know this in all reporting, but it's a cautionary tale. Just watch yourself. Increasingly today, I think we treat email and other kinds of communication in a really faceless way. We don't meet a lot of people. We do things, we don't even talk to them on the phone. We almost kind of have this disembodiment going on when we communicate with people. So I just caution that be careful that you don't slander people when you ask questions. Reporters have to be careful in the way they ask them. If you get a tip, you can't call somebody up and say, hey, do you know if so-and-so is still taking money out of the till at X place? I mean, that's slander. That's not checking out a tip. You have to figure out other ways to ask that question. Treat your email communications as if someone will publish them tomorrow. If you decide to get into somebody's face in email, just know it's gonna come back to bite you. That politician or somebody else could decide to send that email out to everybody he or she knows, and your reputation could be down here in, a nanosecond. So always be respectful in whatever kind of email you send, and just know, what would I do if this was published somewhere?